Hey guys, it's Lord Apples here. Sorry I didn't put out a video last week. I actually had a friend who was between apartments staying with me and a bunch of other things going on all at the same time. So it was a little bit crazy. But I do have a book review for you guys today. And I was looking for an astrology book for dummies that wasn't too dumbed down. Because I noticed that I have a lot of beginner fill-in-the-blank books where like the first half of the book is telling me what I already figured about the thing, right? So this one is actually really good beginners without it just regurgitating super common information at you in the beginning. Right from the beginning, it gets right down into the nitty-gritty, telling you about the history of astrology, the difference between using sidereal zodiacs and tropical zodiacs, and also about like the house system that she uses, which is, I think it's called Placidus. Anyway, my philosophy's coming out of me. Anyway, so Placidus. Most of your birth charts use the Placidus house configuration, right? But there are other house configuration systems, and she doesn't go into detail about all of those because this is a beginner's book, but she tells you in this book we're talking about the Placidus, and in other books you can read about the other house systems, but this right here is the basics. And I love how she really talks about the elemental aspects a lot, which is extremely helpful later on when you are synthesizing things, right? You're like, oh, well, we have a cardinal element of fire with a mutable air, and those are going to interact differently than a mutable fire with a cardinal air. They are. And she really goes into detail on that, which I like a lot. And the different houses. So like her chapter 1 gives you a brief overview of everything, and then each of the subsequent chapters does a deep dive into what she did an overview on. Yes, I absolutely love that, because just from chapter 1 I know, okay, this is what the book is going to cover in more detail later on. And that was actually something that I really, really appreciated about this book, was a synopsis of what I was going to learn. Because usually I go to read the chapter headings for that, and I only get a vague idea of what the book is going to touch on. But chapter 1 breaks it all down in a macroscopic view, and then each of the subsequent chapters goes deep into one subject. So chapter 2 is the Zodiacs, and she has quite a lot of information. I'm just going to flip through the Aries one, how to spot an Aries. And then it has this page, both pages, and then boom. I mean, like 4-5 whole pages. Like, that's a lot of information for each zodiac sign. So, moving on. She also talks about the different zodiac signs in the, the different planets in the zodiac signs. So chapter 3 focuses on the planets, and she, what she does is she gives you, the sun is not the best example, because that whole chapter 2 is talking about each zodiac and its sun sign correspondent. So in this chapter, whenever she talks about planets and the signs, she just tells you about the sun and tells you to refer to chapter 2 for details on what it means if a zodiac falls as your sun sign, which most everybody knows. The moon. Let's look at the moon. So she gives the glyph, the rulership, the natural houses, its significance, what it rules over. So in this case, the moon rules over your emotions, habits, stomach, body fluids, subconscious, memory, sixth sense. And then she gives a brief mythology on it. The goddess Diana was the twin sister of Apollo, the god of the sun. Diana was the goddess of the hunt, right? So, and then she talks about what it means for different signs to fall into your houses. So she does all of this information on the moon, boom, and then she talks about your moon in the houses. That's highlighted because my moon is in Aries. Explains a lot of my brief but volatile temper tantrums. Anyway, love the moon in Aries. So, and she does this for each of them. Moon in Leo, moon in Sagittarius, all the way down. She does the same thing with Mercury and all the planets. So, even if you know nothing about astrology, you can look at your birth chart. You can see, oh, the moon is in this house, and this house is ruled by this sign. Come here. You can see that your moon is in whatever zodiac sign it's in, and you can read it. So even without knowing astrology, you can get a really good idea of your birth chart just by reading these brief paragraphs that she gives you. And she does say that it's better to synthesize things on your own, but this is a good starting point and jumping off point. However, her jumping off points throughout this book, she does this with everything. She literally, like, you can pull what she has here and do a very vague synthesis of your birth chart. Once you get really good, you can synthesize yourself, which she helps to do by explaining a lot of in-depth things, right? So, on to more in-depth things. Chapter 4 is all about the houses. So, I didn't realize that if you have a majority of your houses in the northern hemisphere instead of the southern hemisphere, that means something. If you have a majority of your houses, of your planets, if the majority of your planets in your chart occur in a specific quadrant, that means something. But then there's also the house classifications. So if you have mostly planets in your angular houses or your succedent houses, that means something. Then there's the elemental houses. So each house has an element. So if all of your planets are in the fire houses, that also means something. So before you even look at the specifics of which specific houses your planets are in, you could take that bigger view and see like, oh, okay, I have such and such houses, such and such planets in this house, such and such in that house. Oh, okay, I fall into the trinity of fire. Or, oh, that falls into the trinity of endings, or what have you. And you can synthesize interesting generalizations about your personality on those things, which is incredibly interesting to me. Then she goes into each of the houses in depth, and she talks about signs that are on the house cusps, right? And I think that this is probably one of my favorite excerpts from this book. If Aquarius is the ascendant and Uranus is in the 6th house, then the energy of Uranus would manifest through the 6th house, and workplace changes would affect the individual, aka ascendant. Reversing this with Uranus in the 1st house and Aquarius on the cusp of the 6th house, changes initiated by the individual would affect his or her job. It would be the other way around. And so she talks about those interesting things. The difference between a sign on the cusp and a planet in the house is a subtle yet important point to grasp. Yes. I wish that she had put a star there herself, right? That's in chapter 4. So yeah, and then it goes into Aries in all the different houses and what that means. So you can easily look at your birth chart and see like, oh, my 3rd house is in Aries, and go here and read 3rd house in Aries, and you've got it. You've already got a good general idea of what that means. And whenever you synthesize it yourself, you have a jumping off point, as I said before. So then she also goes directly into planets in the houses. So not only do you have planets and signs, but you have planets and houses, and you have signs and houses, or houses and signs technically. So yeah, like whenever I say that this is so in-depth, I think the chapter 4 on houses is one of the thicker chapters in this book, Chapter 5 is the aspects. And the way that she breaks down aspects is beautiful. Here is where she's showing the margin of error that you have, right? Because two planets being 60 degrees of each other, being a sextile, they don't have to be exactly 60 degrees from each other. They can be as far away as 66 or 68 degrees from each other, and they're still considered a sextile. But she talks about the importance of noticing if you do have a perfect degree, which you can see on a lot of your birth chart apps, right? They'll show you exactly what all that is. If it is exactly 60 degrees, then that's really, really important, right? Then that's like a true sextile, right? And then she breaks down the different aspects and gives you a brief overview of what they mean. And just like with everything else, there is, just like with the houses, there is this really cool thing. She also teaches you how to read, I think it's called Aspectarian. She teaches you how to read that and the birth chart, right? Yes. She gives celebrity birth charts, so I think she even has like political figures, and she's got Anderson Cooper, right? So her sample birth charts are very, very interesting, and it kind of backs up what she's saying, and I really like how she uses examples from real people, people that most people are aware of. Like, you can watch Anderson Cooper, you can get a really good idea for his temperament, and if you look at his career, you're like, wow, like he's this kind of person, and then his birth chart literally tells you that. So yes, she has this cool thing where if you have certain aspects that make certain shapes, they mean something. Just like with, the houses, if you have most of your houses in one quadrant or in one hemisphere, you can draw vague generalizations about that. These are actually more rare aspect things, right? So the different aspects are grand trines, fixed T-squares, and stelliums, right? So it's all very interesting and all very complicated, and I love it. Then she gets into the aspects where she, again, will be like, oh, sun conjunct moon, and she'll tell you the sun conjunct all the planets, and then the moon conjunct all the planets, so you have all of that information. You can literally synthesize a birth chart based purely on what she's saying and never do any synthesizing yourself, which is a bit of a handicap, right? Because the first thing that I did, instead of trying to synthesize my birth chart on my own, was just piecemeal together her different paragraphs, which has given me a very good and very solid idea of my birth chart. But there's subtleties in how planets interact, and it's those subtleties that can show you where I think astrology really shines and shows you things that just vague pieces cannot, right? So what she's giving you is the pieces to the puzzle, and you can put that puzzle together, right? But you're going to miss some pieces if you never synthesize things on your own. So try not to use her paragraphs, as good as they are, as the end-all be-all. Read it and then look and see if you agree with that, because that's really what she wants you to do. She wants you to use these paragraphs as a jumping off point. And then we have Chapter 6, Astrology in Action and How to Read a Chart. I feel like this chapter could have been bigger and better. I'm having a little bit of trouble grasping what synthesizing the chart really is and how to do that in different ways of how to do that. And I actually got a separate book specifically on synthesizing charts, right? But you will go very, very far with this book. This book is $24.99 US dollars. I think it's one of the best $25 I've ever spent on an astrology book. It just gives you everything that you need to know right off the bat, and really gives you those example paragraphs, right? of every house, where you can just start throwing things together and figuring yourself out without having to do all the synthesizing by yourself. That is really cool, but don't let it be a crutch. Again, very, very good book. The illustrations in here are phenomenal. And if I can understand it, anyone can understand it, because I've always been intimidated by astrology. And it's one of the reasons why I never dived into it before. And this book didn't make it easy, but it made it understandable. And that's everything, right? I have the next book in this set, because this is a two-parter. You have the complete book of astrology, and you have the complete book of predictive astrology, which is when someone asks you a question, you can answer it with astrology, right? You can predict things with astrology. So that's going to be really cool. It's whenever I get to that point, but I don't think I'm going to get to that point in the next couple months, maybe. We'll see. But the other book that I got, where is it? So this might be my very next book that I review. As you can see, it's not a huge honkin' book, but this is an oldie but a goodie. The Art of Chart Interpretation by Tracy Marks. And this is the one that I got that I hope is going to really help me learn to synthesize charts on my own and in a fluid manner, because I really want to know how to just look at a chart and be like, haha, I know these things, which takes a lot of memorization, right? But this book makes it easy. And I hope you guys like this book review. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more occult book reviews. I really cover all kinds of different topics. If you like this book, or if there are other astrology books that you would like to recommend to others, please put those in the comment section down below. And until next time, happy dabbling and bye-bye.